drawing features to me as a non-Muslim who came from just a very diverse background was his humility and his humanness.
Kevin James is a supervising fire marshal in Brooklyn, New York, who converted to Islam as a young man.
I felt a kinship to him also personally, and there's probably about 1 billion Muslims who would say the same thing personal, this personal kinship that they feel with him. He grew up an orphan. I'm not an orphan. I have 2 parents, but my position in society, I've always felt separate. America is a racial nation, and either you're black, you're white, you're Italian, you're Jewish, you're this and that. So coming from a mixed background, I felt like kind of in limbo. My father is Native American and African American, and my mother is Jewish. They were very a-religious, I would say, to the point of being atheists or agnostic. I recall as a child, we get a dreidel on Hanukkah, we had a menorah in the house, and we also had a Christmas tree and exchanged presents. So I just never really identified with any religion, but what was always emphasized was discussion and dialogue and seeking for the truth. So I went through a period of trial and error searching, and I stumbled, I guess I almost literally stumbled on Islam. What appealed to me was the universality of the message. Any religion that gives a code of righteous, ethical conduct and respect and gratitude and obedience to one being is Islam. So here is a book, the Holy Quran, that validates other religions, the diversity of mankind, and it puts the onus of salvation on the believer. The Quran teaches you that the saving of one life is as if you saved all of humanity. And that's one of the reasons why I became a firefighter. What more noble calling than that, to save a person's life, to save people, to save their property?
There was another fire in the back. There's been a couple fires here.
Okay, yeah, so show me what you have. From being a firefighter, I became a fire marshal. That's an arson investigator.
How long has this been vacant?
That's another form of prevention, of saving lives.
Well, I guess there's no doubt what caused this.
A firefighter, he'll risk his life to save you, whether you're black, brown, red, Jew, Muslim, Christian, atheist. He's not asking you what your philosophy is or looking at your color. He's looking to get you out of the building.
Y'all is from Brooklyn.
That's why many people say that firefighting is a calling, because of that self-sacrifice, the willingness to just put others before yourself. To be a good Muslim, you serve people. And specifically, Prophet Muhammad, he asked the question to people around him, do you love your Creator? Serve your fellow man first.
The message Muhammad had received from God revealed that his people would be held accountable in the next life for their behavior in this one. Although Muhammad was initially reluctant to tell others about his experience, a new revelation commanded him to make his message public.
So he calls all of his family members together and he says, what would you say if I told you that there was this army waiting to attack us on the other side of that hill? They said, we would believe you. And he said, what would you say if I told you I'm a messenger from God? I think it's absurd. You called us together for this? And he says, will no one support me in this? And the only person is a child, Ali, who's his cousin, gets up and says, I will support you. And they think this is hilarious, that this is who's going to follow this prophet is a child.
Think about it. There's a man, a middle-aged man, who doesn't know how to read or write, who has no wealth, who is an orphan. Yes, he is from a very important tribe, but he works for a woman. And he now says, I'm the prophet. God has spoken to me. This is not going to fly.
The divine message that Muhammad brought to his fellow Meccans carried with it a sharp warning for their increasingly materialistic society.
He was coming to warn the people of Mecca and the surrounding countryside and his own tribe of Quraysh that unless they pulled themselves together and started creating a more just and decent society, restoring the old tribal values of looking after the poor, the orphan, the widow, the oppressed, then there was going to be a terrible catastrophe.
The Arabs did not believe in afterlife. They really thought that life ended with death, and there was no resurrection, there was no coming back, there was no reincarnation.
So now Muhammad is saying, you know that one God we spoke of? When you're going to die, you don't just disappear, but you're going to be accountable to that God for the good deeds and the bad deeds.
He was bringing a moral, ethical, social message to his people that we're all in the same boat before God and we must treat each other well with compassion and justice and equity.
The revelation Muhammad received on the Mountain of Light was only the first of many that he would continue to receive for the rest of his life.
The revelation does not come in a lump sum. It doesn't just come down from heaven, here's the book, now go out and teach it to the people. No. It is coming down slowly. It's coming down as events unfold. And it's explaining the events, but it's also coming down in a way that he can absorb it. Because the idea is that this thing is so tremendous, this thing is so immense, that it's not something that we can give you all at once. This is going to take time.
He used to say that I never once experienced a revelation without feeling that my soul had been torn from my body.
The Prophet could be sitting, he could be on horseback, he could be walking, he could be talking, but he was suddenly seized by the divine word.
He would feel a great weight descend upon him. He would sweat profusely, even on a cold day. Sometimes, he said, it would be like the reverberations of a bell, and that, he said, is hardest for me. It's not the words that were coming, but he'd have to listen very hard for the meaning of what communication, divine communication, was coming through.
After Muhammad received each revelation, he would recite it to the people who were with him, and they would pass it on to the community.
When the Prophet, who did not know how to read and write, started revealing the words of the Quran, they acquired credibility because of the very nature of the words spoken. People would look at it and say, my goodness, this cannot be the words of a man. He could not have made this up.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون واعتصموا بحبل الله جميعا ولا تفرقوا واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم.
The Quran is the most extraordinarily beautiful discourse. It doesn't come over in translation, but the Arabic is extraordinary. When the first Muslims heard the Quran, many of them were converted to the Prophet's message, not necessarily because of its content, but because of its beauty.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم